Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the RevOps Podcast. I am your host, Jordan Henderson, and I am joined, as usual, by Jonathan Stevens and Brandon Redlinger. Go ahead, guys.
Hey, guys. What's up?
Hey, guys.
Cool. Super helpful. So this week...
what are you expecting us to say otherwise? Like, every week it's like, no matter what we say, it's like, Jesus, guys.
What did you... Hey, like, you fat Alberted your way into this. I'm a little... all right? But this week, we actually got some feedback from one of our former colleagues who's actually a good friend to most of us. Scott sent us some feedback that we've been talking about a lot of topics, and we've been touching on marketing operations topics, and that people were really enjoying that piece. He particularly was really enjoying that piece. So we are deciding to lean into that feedback a little bit and do a bit of a marketing operations specific RevOps sort of topic. And this week we're going to be talking about, as a part of our 201 series, diagnostic metrics for your intent-based marketing strategy, which is super exciting because intent-based data is relatively new and is, honestly, it's a huge piece of most ABX experiences for businesses, and companies are really starting to lean into intent data. But so first we should talk about what an intent-based marketing strategy is, because it feels like we should lay that foundation, because it is a relatively new thing. Probably we have some listeners who aren't using intent data or don't have an intent-based marketing strategy, and so I want to lay that framework for everybody. Does either of you want to take a crack at that? Because I have a definition, but considering, Brandon, you worked at Demand-Based Engagio, which is an intent-based marketing company, that maybe you would have a definition for people to use.
So Engagio is not intent data, but yeah, demand-based was for sure. But I feel like Jonathan really wants to have a crack at this, because he's yelling that we should do more marketing. He's doing more marketing.
I'm going to save the audience so we can keep this going faster and read the definition.
Yeah, which one of us should just read the definition?
Yeah, intent-based marketing involves marketing a service or product based on a customer's online actions or previous actions that you can use to indicate their intent to purchase or consume or use or whatever the products or services that you provide. So it's using the actions, using previous actions, current actions to it online in general, right? To signify whether or not they have intent towards a product like yours, which
right. And usually when we're talking about like intent data, when it comes to marketing, usually that's third party data, right? So that's actions that they're taking on properties that you do not own. So that could be other websites, that could be on social, whatever that might be.
And a lot of times you can combine intent data with third-party and first-party data. So you're dealing with reverse IP on your website to identify accounts, but you're also using your tracking pixels with your marketing automation platforms to be able to get that first-party data when people are on your website and figure out what they're clicking on. Totally.
It's usually some conglomeration of your own first-party data. Are they on your website? Are they responding to emails from you? That's engaging with marketing materials. Your competitors' sort of content and their websites and their social, experience and what they're doing there, and previous history with you is usually played into it. There's a lot of data points that usually typically feed these data models, which is a huge important piece to get right, and we'll kind of touch on identifying when that's wrong as a part of our diagnostic metrics. But super valuable, right? Like it's pretty easy to understand why intent data would be a valuable thing. If you can only make 100 phone calls a day, wouldn't you rather those 100 phone calls go to people that you at least have a reason to believe have some intention to buy what you're selling, versus just picking 100 people and calling them, right? It's targeting is essentially one of its biggest value adds. Cool. So let's say this: you're doing intent. You have intent-based marketing. It's live. You're running with it. You got 6 Sense. Who's the other players? Bombora is in that space. I think Demand-based was.
Like you said, Demand-based. Yep.
Demand-based. Yeah. They're all intent data platforms. I'm sure there's some others I'm missing. If I am, ping me. Whatever. We'll list you next time. I don't care.
Everyone does intent these days.
Yeah. Whatever. There's a lot of intent. ZoomInfo has intent data. I think everybody has some version of intent data. At Bring DNA or Revenue.io, we use 6 Sense. You're doing it. How do you measure success? And I actually want to move past like the things you use to measure a lot of marketing success, right? Like conversions, pipeline generated, total closed business that came out of these campaigns. Like that's kind of low hanging fruit. You're going to use that to measure the success of your intent-based marketing strategy as well. But I want to talk about some things that are specific to intent-based marketing, particularly. And so the first metric that I think is super important is stage change rate. Is either of you familiar with stage change rate?
The rate at which the stage changes.
That's exactly right definition. But so when you're doing, and I actually pinged Jonathan about this earlier, when you're doing intent marketing, usually you get some version of what their level of intent is, right? And so you usually rate them by stages of like, they're a target, they're in consideration stage, they're in decision stage, they're in purchase stage. The further down that funnel they get, the more intent they have to buy a product like yours. You know that because of all the data that you're feeding into this model, right? And the stage change rate as a metric, your goal with an intent-based marketing strategy isn't just to say, hey, I want to find everybody in purchase and close them. That's one piece of an intent-based marketing strategy. An equally important piece of this strategy is saying, great, I want to take everybody that's in consideration and warm them into decision. And I want to take everybody in decision and warm them into purchase. And I want to take everybody in target and warm them into consideration, because now I'm not just feeding my funnel for 3 months, I'm feeding my funnel for years to come, right? I'm continuing to identify accounts, push them through that funnel. That way, when they get to the sales team, they're already in purchase mode. They're ready to go. They're a warmer lead, right? Make sense?
Yep.
Cool. Totally. And I mean, I think we talked about this before, and I have very strong feelings about this, but like intent data is just a piece of the funnel, right? You can't rely on intent data for the end all be all when it comes to like behavior based signals. Right? It's just another value. It could be a very valuable piece. But yeah, layer that on to your current marketing strategy to help customers move down that funnel quicker, right? It itself is not going to do it.
Yeah.
Along with everything else, it will do it.
Right. And to your point, exactly what you said, move them down that funnel quicker. And that's why stage change rate is such an important metric, because I'm looking at, when I think of stage change rate, I'm thinking, how fast are we pushing people through that funnel? How fast are we getting somebody from consideration to decision, from decision to purchase, right? And I want to measure and improve on the speed at which we are pushing them through that. And so I would just take, here's how many people on September 1st we had in consideration, and on October 1st, here's how many we have in decision, right? Like that's the rate. 10% of them moved. We're moving them through at a pace of 30 days. 10% of them will move through 30 days. The next month, look at it. Do we move 12% in 20 days, et cetera, right? Like, am I doing better? Am I getting better at that metric? Which is really valuable. If you're doing really well there, you're going to start to fill the funnel more and more as you go. And you want that number to continually get better, because then you know where to invest your marketing resources and your sales team's getting warmer leads. That's all great. All fine and dandy. We're set on what it is, why the metric's important. Now there comes the fun part. So say I'm running my intent-based marketing strategy, and I'm looking at stage rate, and it is getting worse over and over and over, right? Like I'm looking at August, and I'm looking at September's, I'm looking at October's, and oh my God, we're moving less and less stuff down the funnel. We're moving it slower. It's getting bad. What the heck do I do to fix this problem?
The first thing I'd look at in that scenario is your database getting stale? Have you just been hitting the same contacts at the same accounts over and over, expecting new results? You've got to feed the system. You've got to continually feed new leads and contacts into the system. Otherwise, you're going to get stale at some point.
Love that one. Love that as an easy point, right? Like if you're, by definition, if your database is getting stale, you're going to run out of people to move forward in those stages. So it is going to get worse and worse. that is just mathematically true.
And the answer is not send more emails.
Yeah, the answer is not necessarily send more emails. So yeah, I think that's a great starting point, because if that's your problem, that's first an easy solve. And second, like it absolutely will be the problem if it is.
Yeah. And to that point about sending more emails, sometimes that is how marketing organizations will react. Well, we're not getting enough engagement. Let's up the ante on the emails. But what you end up doing is just getting everybody to unsubscribe and opt out of your content. And that's the opposite of what you want to do.
You end up ignoring them more.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now they're actually going backwards. They were in purchase. Now they're in decision.
Now they're out of it.
I'm not totally sure I want to buy from them. They're going to pepper me forever, which, by the way, would absolutely happen. It's totally possible. So then let's take it the next step further. So my stage change rate is bad. It's getting worse and worse, and I'm constantly refreshing my data. I feel like my data is up to date. It's still bad. Now what do I do?
Maybe look at your keywords or the threshold that triggers an action with your keywords, right? So if you have your tier 1 account keywords and you say anything that gets a score of 70, does that still make sense?
And one thing we ran into early on in our implementation is we got a little too generic on our keywords and had some words in there that might have meant broader terminology to the point where we're getting a ton of hits on these keywords. Like, these guys aren't showing intent at all. They're not interested at all, but they've got a high intent score. And you got to make sure your keywords are very specific. Otherwise, they're going to pick up stuff you don't want it to pick up.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, going back to looking at the model, right? I think that's probably one of the most important things when you're running intent-based marketing is reevaluating your intent model consistently, because it will change or it will be broken, and it's probably going to take you a long time to get it right. That's, to be totally honest. I mean, you're not going to get it right the first try. It's going to be good. It's better than nothing, but a year into doing it, you're going to be much better at it. Your model will be more fully fledged for sure. It's just constant iteration. So let's say then I'm happy with my model. I'm refreshing my data. It's still bad. What else?
Find a different vendor.
Well, you guys, you're sort of missing like the obvious one though, right? Go ahead.
I think the enablement piece is probably the next piece on the puzzle. Are the sales reps enabled to actually surface these contacts and leads?
Huge.
Or look at the accounts? Yeah.
Super important. Yeah, absolutely. Are we training the reps? Are we training everybody to do that? And then the other one that I would say is let's A/B test what content is actually what is actually effectively pushing people through the funnel, what isn't, and let's fix our content approach to our marketing strategy to push these through. And you can do that really easily, because you could say, hey, we're going to send half of them this piece of content, half of them this. How many moved forward and how many didn't? And then like this one works great. Let's use it for everybody, right? We can evaluate that through the entire cycle. And that's going to help us get better as well. And also break your stage change rate down to industry, to ICPs, like different things so you can identify, like, we're really doing a good job with moving finance ones forward, but not real estate, right? Maybe real estate isn't the best target for our intent-based marketing strategy, or maybe we need to reevaluate our entire marketing content approach to that vertical specifically. Like, start to narrow in on those things.
And you can also narrow down your messaging by persona. So you may speak to one persona way differently you speak to the other. So that's also a consideration. Are you being too general with your content? You're just blasting the same content to every persona, where maybe a different persona would like a different type of content or something more technical. Totally
agree. Brandon, you just nodded. Do you have any words to say, or just gonna nod at us?
Yeah, I'm taking Jonathan's role today. Yep.
I've noticed that. I think you're on Slack right now, but whatever.
I was gonna say, Slack is now closed. Don't worry.
All right.
There was a message from the CEO.
We've got your full attention. We're talking about a product that you literally used to be a part of a company that sold, but whatever. You don't want to.
Well, okay. I mean, no. A few things though, like. The reason I do like demand-based a lot is you have so much control over how you're defining the intent. There are some companies out there that are like bigger companies in the intent space that are known to be black boxes, right? And if it's a black box and you're not getting great results from that company, like, you're not going to be happy with that, right? If it's a black box but you're getting amazing results, fine. It really doesn't matter. Success cures all, right? But that is why I like demand-based so much, because you have 100% control over exactly how you're defining it and what happens with that data, and when it's getting surfaced, where it's getting routed, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think there's a lot to be said about the vendors themselves, and also that, like, there are vendors that are great in some industries and there are vendors that are not great in others. So I think it's 100% fine if you want to use demand-based and Bombora, right? Like, I think the more data points that you have that help you feed that overall intent signal, the better, right? Because they aggregate that intent data in different ways, right? Bombora is a co-op, whereas demand-based is not, right? Whereas also 6 Sense, they do their own proprietary thing. You know, they are the black box, right?
Yeah. It goes back to, like, going beyond reevaluating your intent model, reevaluate who's providing your intent data, because
exactly.
You're, like you said, there's a lot of third-party data that comes into this equation. You're relying on the accuracy of a lot of third-party data, and what you're actually relying on is the accuracy of your vendor's ability to get that third-party data accurately.
And also connect to your first-party data, because the taxonomy of connecting your CRM, your marketing automation platform, and your website are critical. If those aren't really in cohorts with each other, then your tool is worthless.
Totally. Yeah. I didn't do it here. You did it, Jonathan.
It was tough, but worth it.
I shielded you from other projects for like 3 months while you did it. But Cool. All right. Anything we want to add on to that before I move on to the next metric?
Well, I mean, when you are evaluating vendors, I think it's really helpful to ask them questions like, how do you collect your data? Where do your scores come from? What sites do you collect your data from? How do you identify the contacts in those accounts, right? How do you do that account matching? And also things like, I think very relevant these days is just their compliance, right?
Yeah,
like if they collect data in non-compliant, GDPR and CASL and all those ways, like you can actually get in trouble yourself.
Totally. You could. Yeah, you absolutely could. And I would say when you ask them about where they get their data, every one of those vendors is going to explain where they get their data and explain why that's the best way to get data.
Yes.
And they're all doing it in a different way, but all of them are going to say, and here's why that's better. And there probably are reasons for each of them of why that particular way is better, right? And there's pros and cons of every way, which is why when you're looking at data vendor sources, compliance and asking that question important. It's also very, very important to ask for references. Get a couple other customers to tell you.
I love that.
Just jump on a call and say, hey, like, how accurate is their data? Have you guys had any issues with it, right? Their customers, they're going to give you their happiest customers. That's fine. They're still going to be honest with you, and that's what's important. But I would always ask for that.
Yeah. And here's one gotcha for anybody looking for an intent-based platform. If you work internationally at all, you better make sure that they can segment out headquarter accounts, because otherwise you're going to be
super important. Cannot emphasize this enough.
Yeah.
If they
otherwise
don't,
you're going to be adding like 5 different accounts, same account, all different territories. Good luck figuring out which one is which.
Even if you're not international, think about targeting Google. Google has HQ1, HQ2 offices in 48 states. If you're not able to identify which of those offices is the HQ, that's super problematic for your territory planning.
And 20 different countries, too. Like every subsidiary of Google has, which there are like thousands of them, right?
Right. And I like to use intent data in our territory planning from a segmentation standpoint, because it's really nice to say, like, okay, this territory has this much business. This is how many high intent potential customers we have identified in each of these territories, right? That's a good way to separate and create some fairness for your AEs. And if you can't identify the account HQ, you can't use that data when using territory planning, which is super problematic. Sixth sense. Sorry. Anyways, moving on. I have expressed that to them directly. It's been
heard. Plenty of other people have too.
Yeah. So all right, next metric. I can't wait to get the sort of angry email for that, which is fair. Sorry, Anthony.
Until they sponsor our podcast.
Well, all right. If they're listening, I'm happy they're listening so far. It's actually been a really good tool. I'll give them that. It's been a really good tool. That's been one major limitation that has bugged me for a year. So
you will not find a tool out there that does not have some type of limitation. No tool is going to be perfect out there. You're just going to have to live with those.
Especially in this vendor, they're mostly relatively new platforms, right? There's none that have been doing it for 25 years. So, all right, next metric, deal cycle. And deal cycle, we've talked about this a lot. Like, how fast are you getting from qualified opportunity to closed one? Like, how many days is it taking you, right? And if you have a lot of high rate deal cycle, that's great. If you have a slower deal cycle, enterprise software, it's probably longer. Deal cycles should speed up, theoretically. If you are warming leads through your intent-based marketing strategy, warming them to the point of decision and purchase, and then they're getting that meeting with the sales rep, that's when your reps are unleashed on them. That first conversation is a totally different conversation to the first conversation from cold outbound, right? Because they're warmed up, they know who you are, they're familiar with the problems you solve, they're more likely to be able to move through the process much more rapidly because they're already partially sold. And because you're targeting people that have some intent to purchase your tool, that they have some intent to purchase your tool. And so that you can actually push them through the process a little bit faster. So deal cycle, super easy way and important, I think probably often missed way of measuring the effect of your intent-based marketing strategy. And so before I move on to the question that you guys know I'm going to ask, anything you want to add on deal cycle, why it's important for this?
No, I think we got it nailed.
All right, nailed it. Dave, use that bit for the video clip. Thank you. Nobody that's listening is going to get that if they don't follow me on LinkedIn. Sorry, everybody. Follow me on LinkedIn. You'll understand why I said that. All right. So then, here comes the logical thing, right? My deal. I've used intent-based marketing. It's creating a lot of opportunities, but my deal cycle, it's getting slower, or worse, or staying the same. What do I do? What am I doing wrong?
Everything that we just talked about for the
You're not wrong, right? Like, you're not wrong. But there's one thing you talked about that I think is the most important one, and I'm gonna let one of you figure out what it is slowly, probably.
So yeah, probably. So I think one thing is, are you warming these leads up enough? Are you sending them specific enough content that they know who you are and what you do? Because a lot of marketing organizations just give you very top of funnel. These are the top 5 ways to close a deal. Here you are, and now the rep is essentially having to do all the work of warming up the lead, where the marketing team probably could have gotten another email or 2 in there before they got to the rep, or at least been a little more specific on what they do.
Totally agree with that one. That wasn't my number one, but it's probably like an equal tie actually. So well done, Jonathan. Brandon, you want to take a crack?
I don't know. Let's hear it.
Come on. You got to take a guess. Well, give me one. Give me an answer.
Well, I mean, I do think the point about just making sure the content match it, like content is honestly a huge part of it, right? Like if they trigger your intent signal on a specific keyword, just like honestly make sure your content matches that keyword. And honestly, I think that's kind of one of the mistakes that a lot of people make, is they just put all of their important keywords into one, tier, and then that tier automatically triggers, and then it's sent to the rep. It's like, hey, this person is hot right now. They just hit a score of 60. Well, if I don't know what that person actually triggered, what keyword that person actually triggered on, how do I know what content I should actually follow up with? So, I mean, that is I'll go ahead and plug Demandbase again, but that's one of the things that, Demandbase does pretty well, right? Yeah. Because you can sort all of your, leads or accounts that have that tier 1 trigger by the actual keyword that they triggered on. Now that rep says, okay, this is what they're really interested in. Let me actually serve up content that is specific to that very keyword.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
And I think it kind of goes back to the enablement piece we talked about before. Not only making sure the reps know what's in that content that they interacted with, but also enabling the reps to know how to follow up on that content, to really be able to segment that population and understand, okay, this population converted on this, so they must be interested in that.
Well, you're talking about the first-party engagement data. Are you talking about first-party engagement data?
I think he's talking about that they came through intent in general. Just sales. The sales team is empowered to understand that leads that come from, through the intent journey are going to be different leads than leads that come from, like some other source, right? Like cold outbound, that sort of thing. And enabling them to know how to work those specific leads based on how they were warmed up through their intent journey is how you're actually going to speed up that sales cycle. By the way, that was my number one. Thank you, Jonathan. You guys got there eventually, like I said.
Yeah,
but it was good. I knew you would. Like I knew
we did it, Brandon.
Together, Jonathan, we can try to maybe read Jordan's mind.
Yeah, start. You guys starting to see how I work a little bit here. It's only 30 episodes in. But actually, Brandon, back to your point, because I think it's super interesting. The content thing, right? Not only is the content so important, but I also think it gives you another avenue to measure the effectiveness of your content, because we typically measure content as like, does it convert or does it not? Right? Like that's kind of what most people are left with. How do you measure the effectiveness of content? And this changes that a little bit, because now it's just not, does it convert or does it not? Does this push them through their buyer journey? Maybe if I put this content in paid social, it would never, ever convert a lead. But if I send in an email to high intent people, it might push them from decision to purchase. That's still a really valuable piece of content that I might have killed off otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's honestly, that's why I really do love like stage attribution. Right. When we end up getting around to talking about attribution, and when Jordan stops being a cantankerous curmudgeon here,
I had to make an outline for it like 5 times. Nobody ever makes one.
But I think that's a really good point, though, and something that we will definitely talk about is just like stage attribution. What's the thing that made that person go from one stage to another? It's not just one thing that made them buy, right? I actually care about breaking down my funnel at every single step of the stage.
Yeah,
every step of the deal. Yeah.
lock it in. 2 weeks from now, we're gonna do a stage attribution conversation, specifically a whole convo on stage attribution. We'll do it. I'm not gonna stop being a cantankerous curmudgeon, but we will do it. So deal with it.
All right.
All right, cool.
It is a weighted topic, though.
I love it is a weighted topic. Weighted is a nice pun for attribution modeling, but we'll leave that for the day. Well done, Jonathan. All right. Anything else on deal cycle?
No, you got it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I love the pause where you guys think and just stare into the distance. You both.
You don't think our listeners could tell that I was shaking my head no?
No, I don't think they could tell. And then Jonathan always looks like off to the right, like up, like he's George Clooney trying to like
scratches his chin. Yeah.
The audience can't tell you're thinking. Right. All right. So then the last one I want to talk about is cost per. And I mean this like super broadly, because whether it's cost per lead, cost per acquisition, cost per click, customer acquisition cost, like cost per is typically a metric that's super important to you in one of those versions across your marketing, results. So lowering the cost of any of those things is a really valuable piece of creating intent base, whichever one you're tracking, right? I don't care if it's cost per click or cost per lead or whatever that is. Customer acquisition cost being a really easy example. So if you lower the cost of acquiring a customer through intent data, you should be, like, theoretically, you should be lowering the cost, right? Because you are taking, instead of broadly targeting a whole market, you're targeting people who are in some version showing some level of intent to you. So you should be starting a little bit further down the process in your marketing experience and in your buyer's journey, and therefore the buyer's journey is slightly shorter. Should save me money, right? I'm more targeted, I'm spending less money.
It's kind of a double-edged sword in a way, though, because you kind of have to find a balance, because the more targeted you get, the higher the cost ends up being, especially on the paid side. So
with
you
the
almost
paid
have
social thing specifically. Yeah, that's totally true. So write that out of the equation, account for that, right? So if you're targeting those high intent counts and your paid social staying the same, let's assume that's flat, but my cost pers are going up or staying same. I'm not actually saving money, even though I'm using this intent-based thing, which, by the way, means I'm losing money because I spent a bunch of money on an intent-based platform, and I'm not actually saving money from it, which is one of the reasons I bought it. So now I'm spending a bunch of money on something that's not helping me save anywhere. What do I do? Where do I start?
Yeah, I think you got to look at your strategy. I think you got to look at how you're identifying your target accounts. Are you getting too focused in on very expensive accounts? Are you solely focused on financial services, where getting those VPs into your system is gonna cost a fortune? Can you diversify a little bit and get your costs down a little bit? That'd be the first place I'd look, is your targeting.
I was going in that same direction, where it's like, what are those, like, how has your decision-making model changed? And are you kind of overweighting with intent now, right? Because honestly, as I said, intent is just a piece of the funnel. It still has, like, I really want to make sure it matches my first-party engagement data. Once my intent data matches that, honestly, it's almost like cheating. I care more about my first-party engagement data than my intent data, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it has your decision-making model changed of how you actually prioritize who you're going after and how you're targeting your people, right? So, if you are putting too much weight on, intent in your target account list in the beginning, you might just want to rethink that.
Yeah. And we end up finding a lot of marketing teams and sales teams will do this. They'll get hyper-focused on what they believe will be the best thing to target without testing a bigger subset of that target. And then you just get that narrow focus and you kind of miss out on the bigger picture. Totally
agree. And I think the other thing I would play with, which is probably a bit of a crazy thing to play with, but I would still do it, is to Jonathan's point, paid social gets very expensive when you're target things, right? And even if assuming it's flat, do I need to use a ton of paid social to warm people through if they're already showing some intent, right? Like if they're already in decision, maybe I can get them to purchase without using paid social against that audience, right? Maybe I can cut my more expensive avenues out of the process and still get the same results, which is something I could play with on the back end to lower my cost per. Because if I don't need to do paid social in that regard, I think most people say, great, we have all this intent data, let's hit them everywhere. Let's email them, let's do everything. Do you need to? You don't always need to. There's probably a lot of people sitting in decision that 3 emails from now might be in purchase, and you didn't ever need to spend $1 to get them to click on something on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And you should play with that and see if you can cut those things out and still get the same results. Because if you can, you're going to lower your costs and save that budget for other things, for other pieces of the funnel.
Yep. As valuable as LinkedIn is, it is expensive. So you have to be very, very targeted on what you're doing there.
Judiciously spending on LinkedIn, for sure. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is like taking a step back, I really do think that you have to set expectations properly with your sales reps, because if you sell intent data as the hottest thing, then you don't train them on how to actually use intent data properly, then they get zero results from intent data. Now they don't trust intent data whatsoever. They don't want to touch anything that has intent data attached to it, right? So I think it's like important to really do that training and set those expectations properly in the beginning.
I actually think, by the way, one of the things you can do is actually use intent data for your marketing strategy for a period of time, and then wait for that moment where the sales reps go, man, these leads we've been getting are really warm. Yeah. And then go, hey, like, you know why? This sweet thing called intent data. Let's show you how to do it. Right?
There you go.
Wait for them to get bought in a little bit. Like, do it a little bit on the marketing side. Because, by the way, that gives you bandwidth to then make sure that your data model is right, and make sure your targeting is right, and make sure your thing is really fully fledged and built out before you roll it out to a whole team of salespeople and tell them to go use it. Because if you roll it out to the whole sales team, to your point, even if you train them really well on it, you make sure they really understand it, and then the data model is broken from the start, they're again going to hate intent data, right? You need to make sure that that's all right before you roll it to that level.
Yeah, show some early wins.
Yeah. And that you can't have them be overextended too, because if you're showing them look at all these accounts showing intent, go after one of them, and they're just like, they get kind of deer in headlights because they need to be somewhat focused on where they're going after. So if you give them too many accounts or too many things to work on, then that
defeats the purpose. It completely defeats the purpose, right? Yeah. I mean, that's why whenever someone's like, I have 3,000 target accounts. Like that completely defeats the purpose of having target accounts.
So you'll be calling those for the next 12 years. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. You have no idea where to focus whatsoever, and you're back to having no idea who you should be going after.
Totally.
Targeting everyone.
Yeah, targeting everyone means targeting no one.
Basically, you're a marketer at that point.
Whoa, hey.
And nobody wants to be that, right?
Those marketers, I'll tell you. Those marketers.
I'm going to get so many angry messages for that comment. All right, so moving on to this week on LinkedIn. I clapped. That's where we should put the noise in, Alex. Thank you. So this week on LinkedIn, I got a question. By the way, it's the second week in a row where I got a question. They're like, I want you to use this on This Week on LinkedIn.
Nice.
So, Alec, just a note that I promised him that I would have you pull the transcript of this section so I could send it to him in advance because he wants an answer sooner rather than later. And I didn't want to type all this up. So if we can make it do that, that'd be super helpful for me. So this week on LinkedIn, a question comes from Nam or Nam. I'm not going to pronounce that right. I apologize. He says, at our company, account managers are responsible for renewals and expansions. We have a customer success team, but they don't fall under the revenue team. So there's not much synergy between CSMs and account managers. Right now, our account managers are totally reactive. They renew clients when the renewal is almost up, and they handle upsells if the upsell comes to them directly. What can RevOps do to help the account managers more and make them less reactive? And so when I told him that I was going to use this question, he responded very excitedly, by the way, which I was excited about too. And then he said a thing that I am never going to forgive him for, which is, by the way, Jonathan is the star of the show.
What?
Which I was like, what?
Jonathan's even in shock.
Yes.
He messaged that to me. Why you go message Jonathan then?
I like this guy. Jordan, by the way.
I almost didn't use the question. I was so insulted. Anyways, so it's a good question though. We're using it anyways. We just had to. What are you doing, man? Anyway. So, but because he's a big Jonathan fan, Jonathan, what's the answer to this question?
Yeah, I mean, as anyone in RevOps will know, reps work on incentives. So if you can incentivize your reps to do this action, they will be more likely to do it. So if you can, it could be compensation, it could be even a leaderboard, just gamify it. Figure out a way to kind of gamify it, and the winner gets an award at the end of the quarter or the end of the month. That could be definitely an effective way to do it.
Totally. Yeah, incentives for me is the easiest thing, right? I assume if they're handling these reactively entirely, that they're not incentivized to do it. Because if they're getting paid properly to do this, they're not going to be reactive. They're going to be proactive because it's worth money to them. That's how sellers typically work, right? If they don't, they maybe shouldn't be selling in a lot of ways. But incentives have to be misaligned here. And the RevOps team can certainly help you take a look at your incentives and make sure they're aligning to actually promoting the behavior you want from this team, which in this scenario is to proactively handle renewals and proactively handle upsells. By the way, if they're not being incentivized from like a quota or booking standpoint for renewals and you're having them process all renewals, what an incredible waste of selling time.
What are you doing?
So if that's the case, and like from an incentive standpoint, your company doesn't want them to ever be incentivized for doing renewals, then CSMs have to take that over, right? You have to figure out some other way to do this, because right now you're taking your sales time, having them spend it on something that's not actually, a good use of their time. They're not growing the business the way they would be growing the business otherwise.
Yeah. Your easiest sell is the person already in the door. So if they're also neglecting your easiest sale, that's gonna be bad for business.
Yeah, which tells me they're probably not getting, again, incentivized for upsells either very well.
Yeah.
Right. Like they should be proactively building those relationships too. Cool. Anything else, Brandon?
Yeah. So this is, kind of top of mind for me right now, but maybe they're just not getting the data that they need, right? So 100% give them incentives, but also give them the tools and make sure that they have the data that they need to get ahead of those, right? Something that we are working on right now, right, with Pendo. Like, huge shout out to Pendo, because Pendo gives us a lot.
Cool tool.
Yeah.
Cool ass tool.
There's so much. So many insights that we can get from actual product usage. Honestly, even if it's like an NPS score, right? It can help you get ahead in your QBRs, or just give you the heads up. Like, look at usage data. Look at how your successful customers, or those customers that are leaving your 9s and 10s, actually using the product, right? Pendo makes it super easy with their NPS tool. They're saying, here are the pages that the people who leave you a 10 actually use, and here are the pages that people who leave you a 3 or 4 use, right? So it's actually looking at your actual product usage data, and then you can work with your product ops or your RevOps team to actually get that data back into Salesforce, because they actually have a bi-directional push. So any data that you have in Salesforce can be obviously piped into Pendo and vice versa, and just making sure that gets written back in places that your sales reps actually look. So we'll go back to also enabling your team. Tell them what this actually means and how to actually use the information that's now being dropped back into Salesforce. So another huge shout out to Pendo.
Yeah, totally.
The other piece I'd add is, are you making it easy for the, kind of what your point is, are you making it easy for the reps to see this? I mean, you can have the reps subscribe to a weekly report that tells you everything that's coming up in the next quarter that you need to renew. So are they subscribing to a basic report at the end? That could be the simplest way to accomplish it.
Right. You can automate a lot of this. You can just make sure you're providing both from an upsell identification standpoint and a renewal standpoint. Hey, this renewal is 90 days out. Here's an email you need to send to let them know their renewal is 90 days out, right? Because if they're handling it reactively, that's not happening, and getting out in front of that's super important. You can automate a lot of that, or at very least find out where your reps are spending their time and put it right in front of them, at a certain time frame above them. Providing the data at the point of decision. You have to for all of these things, right? And then if you're providing the data at the point of decision, you're incentivizing them to do that behavior, and then training and enablement to tell them how, like, this is how you identify upsells. Here's how to process renewals. Here's how to do it in a way that increases value, and et cetera, right? By the way, it should be more proactive than that. Not even just the 90 days, but if you actually want your reps to handle all upsells, and you actually want your reps to handle all renewals, and you're going to incentivize them for doing that, and you're going to provide them all the data, it shouldn't be just, hey, reach out 90 days before renewal. It should be, hey, you should be talking to these people on a consistent basis and building a relationship, because in that regard, you need to have a relationship, right?
Yeah.
So
it does not look good.
You need to train on all. It
doesn't look good to just reach out.
Right.
And that happens so often, right? It's like 30 days before your renewal, you get the email. Hey, why don't you check in with? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like your renewal's coming up
in a year.
Yeah. And it's like sellers move on all the time, so it's oftentimes a new seller, and they're like, hey, good to meet you.
Can I get that commission?
By the way, we're going to raise your price a little bit. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, really? Come on. But no, cool. Anything else you want to add to that? Those are the two that I had actually written down.
Well, so the one other thing is just continue to build relationships. Businesses these days run on relationships, right? So if you build that close relationship with your champion and other people at that account, they'll tell you they'll be much more honest when things aren't going well. And you can have those conversations, and you can like team up with them to figure out how to make the most of your product. And if they're making the most of your product, renewals are natural. Renewals are easy.
Yeah, renewals are natural. It's easy.
And it's not just on the AEs too. The CSMs have some responsibility to make sure
100%.
these accounts are renewing too.
Yeah, obviously, like that. That is actually sort of their job. Yeah,
if they don't have synergy with those AEs, that's also an issue. So you need to solve that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your CE AE alignment super important in this scenario, right? The other thing that, by the way, super topical. I didn't even have it written down, but it comes to mind as you talk about this. If you're like Revenue IO and you have lots of products, we have a whole product suite that we sell people. By the way, you should buy them all. They're awesome. There are customers who might buy one of your products that are going to show intent data.
I was just going to say, yes, exactly.
Right? Like you can use intent data for your current customer base
Full
as
circle.
much as you can use it for outbound, and it can identify upsells, and you can do the same exact stuff that we've already talked about, but you can do it for your current customers too.
100%. Yeah, if they're surging on competitor intent keywords, you're in trouble.
Look at that. We just looped it back in. This seems like a logical place to finish. Any other last thoughts for anybody?
I love it. I think it's a great place to end.
All right, awesome. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much. Again, follow us all on LinkedIn. We release every Wednesday at Wednesday mornings when we release these episodes.
Wednesday morning.
Go to the Apple Store and give us a 5-star review. Follow us on LinkedIn and shoot us your This Week on LinkedIn comments. Again, I got one of these so far, and we'll probably use it soon. But if you record the audio and email it to me, I am much more likely to play that audio, and you will get a feature spot on an episode. Otherwise, just message me them, and I'll read them off and mispronounce your name, and that's fine too. But whatever you want to do, send us your message, give us 5 stars, follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll see everybody next week.
See you next week.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.